So aside from the life table, we have also in the type of survivorship curves in a population. Population is, or the organisms within the population is also characterized by what we so-called life history or life histories. So an organism's life history is actually the whole life cycle of an individual from the day that it was born, how they develop, up to the time that they will now capable of reproducing their own kind. So it is a lifetime pattern of growth, development, and reproduction as it reaches to their post-reproductive stage and even through reaching their life cycle. So there are variations or within the population itself or even different populations. Variations in life history includes breeding frequency, ibig sabihin kung kailan yung mating process, kailan yung breeding time, it is affected by the season or temperature, depending on the quality of the environment. So that is one variation of life history. Age at which reproduction begin. It could be in the middle or it could be an earlier or later. So that matters also with the life history. The number of times an individual reproduces during its lifetime. Kailan ba siya nag-reproduce? Is it once, twice, several times? Okay. The number of offspring produced at each reproductive episode. So, siya ay ba ay with high fecundity, marami ba siyang offspring as we have discussed in the survivorship curve, or kokonti lang, 1 to 2. Okay, of course, that depends on the size of the offspring that they produce. Okay, so most likely for larger animals that have larger offspring, meron din namang isa, dalawa, depende sa ano. Or meron din naman mga polytocous animals like of some of our livestock na kayang mag-bear ng several offsprings or mag-reproduce ng several offsprings during one breeding period or one gestation period. The ratio of male to female offspring produced, okay? Of course, that varies depending on whether reproduction is sexual or asexual. It is because there are also organisms that are capable of asexual reproduction. Okay, ayan. So these are the variations in life history of different populations. So one population to another population varies within or varies with these particular characteristics. Okay, so an organism's life history is considered to face several trade-offs, which is related to reproduction. Okay, so what are some of these trade-offs? Kung what type of mate that one animal choose is a side of trade-off. Yan. So the condition of the environment, again, upon mating or upon breeding season, yan. So these are some of the trade-offs. So trade-offs are imposed by constraints of physiology, energetics, and the prevailing physical and biotic environment, which affects primarily, titingnan natin dito, yung tinatawag na reproduction. Okay? Ayan. So, kasama din sa life history as we are going, or as being discussed in this particular topic is reproduction. We have also what we so-called reproductive success. So there is a specific age at maturity which is influenced by patterns of age-specific mortality, timing of reproduction, and the number and size of the offsprings. So those different factors, age at maturity, okay, which is influenced by pattern of age-specific mortality, the timing of reproduction, the number of and size of the offspring are the three factors that um, uh, um, contributes to what we so called reproductive success. Okay, so those three factors. So what are the trade-offs of reproduction? For example, you have here, for example, two graphs, or you have three graphs. So this one is the mortality and fecundity of a deer, okay, a capring species. So in this first graph here, you can see that the yield of the offspring, the mortality increases as the milk production increases. However, in terms of the percent fecundity, um, nagiging constant yung production of offspring, but in this case, bumababa, or at this particular portion ng age ng deer, nasa optimum level yung milk production, but it decreases. But it doesn't affect still the fecundity or the number of offspring they produce. Dito naman sa tree, for example, yan. So the relative width of annual rings, okay? So there is a specific age specific measurement and the number of reproductive parts that it's produced. So the trend is it is decreasing. Okay? So the relative annual rings, okay, kung pababa ng pababa, pababa din yung pababa yung number of cones. Okay? So in this case, ang implication po nito is that ang annual rings kasi measures the number of years that a particular tree exists. So ibig sabihin, at the younger or the minimal number of annual rings, you will expect that it is still entering the reproductive stage. Kumbaga, the production of reproductive parts of the plant. Okay, so as it age, baga, which is a measure of the number of annual rings. Okay, yan, yan. So, but at a certain point naman, okay, um, um, okay. So let me correct that one. Pag madami ang diameter pala ito, relative width of the annual ring, mas maliit yung cones compared sa maliliit na width. Okay? So you will expect that ito ay medyo matanda na, kaya konti na lang yung cones na natitira. Okay? So kung pababa ang trend is kung pababa ang diameter ng annual ring, so dumadami naman yung kanyang mean number of cones per tree. So I'll try to correct my first statement. The same is true with this particular species of fish. Okay, so absolute fecundity, the number of oocytes that is produced, okay, and the specific growth rate, kumbaga. So kung mababa yung kanyang fecundity or release ng number of offspring, ayan, so yung growth rate niya naman ay tumataas. Okay, so kumbaga, it's just again a representation of principal allocation, kumbaga. If the resources available will feed um, sabihin natin the correct amount of individuals or correct amount of offspring, you will expect na ang growth rate ay what? Mataas. Pero kung ang quantity or number of offspring ay mataas, for example, at this particular portion, you will expect that these offsprings will compete for the available resources. Kaya you will expect that some of the offsprings may die or at the stage of growth and development, hindi na magsa-survive. So you will expect that the growth rate here is minimal. Okay? So those are the trade-offs of reproduction. Okay? So ito naman yung reproductive success na sinasabi ko, which is affected by the three different factors. So as you can see, a cumulative number of offsprings as the years, ayan. So paakyat ng paakyat yung year, paakyat din yung number of cumulative offsprings. Dito naman, sa crab na to, species ng crab, there is an increasing trend again if there is or increasing production of offspring when there is an increasing carapace width. Okay, So most probably that is based on the capacity of the carapace. Siyempre yung parang yung eggs niya ata ay nandito, enclosed dito. So most likely, you will expect that if there is an increase in the width, okay, there's an increased space for their offspring. Okay? Dito naman, total number of young wind and the body weight, okay? So, comparison between coniferous and deciduous forest. Okay? So, tumataas, increasing din. Yan. So, the total number of young wind increased with the body weight during 18 months. Okay. In terms of how organisms in the population survive, grow, and develop, we have two different strategies used by the organism. Okay, so these strategies are based on also on the selection that predicts the species or predicts what particular species is adapted to different environments. Okay, which will differ also in life histories. Okay. Okay. So example or the two strategies is termed as the K strategy and the R strategy or K selection or R selection. So these are their um, comparison. So subjected to density dependent selection with stable, predictable environment. Itong strategy, our strategy naman, unstable, unpredictable environment. So kung ikukumpara mo, our strategies are more resilient to fluctuations. Okay? Kasi organism, okay, which are subjected to different unstable environment will develop what we so-called resiliency on that particular fluctuation. However, in a stable population, for example, which are less affected by the fluctuation. Example, you have the um, environmental factors or environmental condition. Any change, abrupt change in that particular condition could affect the population kasi nasanay sila at stable environment. Okay? So that's the comparison between the two. In terms of their sizes, usually large ang case strategy, small naman ang our strategy. Energy utilization or um, energy utilization, mataas ang sa case strategy, mababa naman sa R strategy. Number of offsprings, case strategy, since they are in large size, maliliit lang. Ito naman, um, maliliit yung sizes, kaya marami silang napoproduce. In terms of maturity, late na sila, but in our strategy, early ang kanilang maturity. Shorter lifespan, yung our strategies, long naman ang ano. So, reproduction takes place more than once. Ito naman, only once. So, type 1 ito, type 2 or type 3. We have equilibrial life history, opportunistic life history. Our strategies are very applicable to lower forms of animals. For example, nasa mga invertebrates, yung mga, most likely invertebrates are very applicable or are best example for our strategy. Case strategy naman ay avian, large mammals, like even humans are considered case strategies or are organisms belonging to K or develop case strategy. So this is an example of a Grimm's model of life history for plants. Okay, so with the three primary strategies, you have ruderals, competitive, and stress-tolerant species. So for letter A, these primary strategies define the 3 points of the triangle. Intermediate strategies are defined by the combination of the three. So in this case, in this particular model, yun ang tatlong strategies ng plant, but at the center, they tend to overlap. Okay? So mas advantage itong tatlo or itong nasa center ng population or ng triangle. Kasi they develop the three characteristics of the different strategies. Okay? So for letter B, life history strategies of most trees and shrubs lichens, biennial herbs, and perennial herbs and annual herbs. Okay, so most likely, this particular portion here are perennial. Ito naman ang lichen, nasa stress-tolerant part. Itong dito, itong ditong nasa circle, they share the characteristic of being stress-tolerant, competitive, and even a ruderal. Okay? Okay. Pag sinabi niyong ruderal, anong ibig sabihin po ng ruderal ay a strategy this is a strategy wherein plants can rapidly colonize disturbed sites. Okay? They can easily adapt to disturbed areas. Yeah. So, in terms of interspecific population regulation, merong dalawang klaseng factor. You have density-dependent factors and you have density-independent factors. So, ibig sabihin po ng density-independent factors, this is very or these are factors that are looking onto the number of individuals in a population in a particular area. So that includes limited food supply and of course buildup of poisonous wastes or even pollution, for example, sa human and other organisms. Okay? So they tend to compete because of the density of the number of individuals in a population, they tend to compete for the resources. Okay? So, meron ng tamang tinatawag na density-independent factors. Usually, this is referring to environmental factors and, of course, the natural phenomenon and natural disasters that is not being controlled or that is not, that, which is not dependent or sabihin natin, which is not reliant to the number of individuals in a population. Kumbaga, walang pake ito doon sa number of individuals in the population. Ito ay nangyayari within the environment or within the physical environment, kumbaga. Okay, so we have density dependent and density independent factors.